Welcome in to the Senate Government Operations Committee meeting of Friday, January 23rd, 2026. First today, witnesses representing the Cannabis Control Board. And I have to admit, I feel like there's a tenuous connection in terms of jurisdiction to this committee, but glad to have you in. Yeah. And James Pepper can start us off. You know everybody on the committee?
Well, hey, James Pepper, John Wall. Very nice to meet you. Congratulations on being appointed.
Yeah. Thanks.
Well, for the record, James Pepper, I'm the chair of the Vermont Cannabis Control Board. I do have my other two board members in the room, so you need to phone a friend. They're right here.
I appreciate both.
Over here. Julie Holbert is a former select board member.
I was briefly.
Yeah, and has been handling a lot of our municipal issues. So, there is, I think that the main intersection between our work and the work of this committee runs through those kind of local regulation sections. But I did want to just say that at the outset, yes, our issue, whether it's the medical use, the adult use, hemp, outdoor cultivators, tax rates, our issue touches at least 5 or 6 different committees. The committee of primary jurisdiction is the Senate Economic Development. But I think there are some issues that are very relevant for this committee, either if you wanted to do a committee bill or if you just wanted to kind of look at what the Senate Economic Development is doing. So you just introduced a bill, and I know Senator White has a bill as well. But I think the general gist of kind of how we're approaching this legislative session is we need to have a little bit more regional coordination with our neighboring states. There are a few things happening at the federal level that indicate that the era of purely intrastate cannabis markets is probably coming to an end. The majority of Americans live in states with an adult use program. It's 24 states, but they're the big ones, California, New York. So, over 50% of Americans live in a recreational cannabis state. So, and then you have 24 states that have adult use programs. I think it's 40 that have medical. But once you hit that magical number of 30 and there's 60 senators, you may start seeing actual legislation pass at the federal level. You also very recently have a newly confirmed director of the Office of National Drug Policy Center, who is admittedly on the record as being pro-legalization. That's the first time that's happened. You have a Republican administration for the first time since the passage of the Controlled Substance Act. Acknowledge medical benefits to cannabis and asked it to be rescheduled to Schedule 3. And part of that executive order also was asking, President Trump asking his administration to establish an allowable THC threshold. The THC is the intoxicating component of cannabis for full spectrum hemp products that would legitimize their interstate commerce. So that at the federal level means that we may want to start having a little bit more coordination with our neighbors with respect to things like packaging, labeling, testing standards, product safety standards, because we may start seeing these products start coming across our borders, and on the flip side, us exporting products. It also means that we need to do what we can right now to ensure that our cannabis businesses can be competitive in that environment. Vermont is doing things very differently than every other state on the craft sense, and the just sheer number of licensees that we have and the size of them, they're tiny compared to almost every other state. 75% of our cultivators are growing on 1,000 square feet of canopy or less. That doesn't even register in most other states. Most states, the smallest tier is 5,000 square feet. I think what I've seen so far of the economic development, or the bill that's been referred to economic development, is really in that vein, trying to find ways to make our licensees more competitive and how to kind of create a New England style regulatory framework around packaging, labeling, transaction limits, purchase limits, edibles and things like that. But with respect to this committee, I think one issue that comes up year after year is retail density. We're seeing that there's 15 or 11, sorry, it's gone down a little bit in recent years for the response. There's 11 retailers in Burlington. I don't know any other kind of single use, like you wouldn't have 11 Italian restaurants in Burlington, I think. Maybe you would, I don't know. Yeah, but I don't think you'd have 11 grocery stores.
Definitely not 11 liquor stores.
Right. I think there's 3 liquor stores in Burlington. And then interestingly, I mean, there's 6 in Rutland. Interestingly, there's 0 in South Burlington or Williston. And that is
3 in Woodstock.
3 in Woodstock.
That's
There it
100,000
is.
people.
And this is that kind of concentration of retail is a direct result of the opt-in, opt-out presumption. So one of the components that makes Vermont unique, our market unique, is that before a town can host a cannabis retail establishment, the voters of that town at a town meeting or just kind of any generally announced election need to hold a vote about whether they're going to allow retail. And there was an initial kind of surge of interest that's really died down. And so now, whereas Burlington has 11, South Burlington, Williston both have 0 because they have not opted in. So I think if it weren't for that opt-in, opt-out provision, I'm not trying to weigh in on the policy, I'm just trying to explain the consequence of it. If it weren't for that, if that presumption was flipped, I think you would see a natural distribution of cannabis retailers across the state. Another kind of really important piece to that, which I think is actually, these 2 issues are intertwined, is the language around how retailers can be zoned locally is pretty confusing. And I think what we've seen as a result is towns are not adopting zoning ordinances or use ordinances or bylaws around cannabis retail siting. The board had no authority to do this. You gave us about 50 different rulemaking directives. Not once was retail siting or any kind of cultivation siting an allowed and authorized rulemaking authorization for the board. So we couldn't do anything. I think you assumed that it would be a local issue. If a town only wanted 5 of these things or 2 of them, and they didn't want them to be near parks or schools or childcare centers, that they would be allowed to kind of do that locally. So there's a section of the law in cannabis title saying you have all the same ordinance and bylaw authority that you would have for any other business, except in a different part of the law, you can't commission the issuance of a local license in a way that would prohibit the operation of the cannabis establishment. And I think those 2 are a little bit in conflict. We had the zoning administrator from South Burlington kind of talk to us about this issue. He's got 17 years being the director of planning and zoning for South Burlington. He couldn't figure this language out. And, that's a very well-resourced town. And, the consequence of getting it wrong is you might get sued and have a long lawsuit. And so I think a lot of towns are just staying away from this. The board would like to see a more normal distribution of retailers around the state, but I think you have to kind of fix this, local zoning issue first to give towns time to, figure out where they want these things, what makes the most sense.
Senator Bielski.
It's been so long since we did the original thing. I thought there was some prohibition at the state level to these establishments being near schools and.
There's a drug-free school zone. You can't have I think it's unclear. I think it applies mostly to illegal sales of cannabis. There's an enhancement in the criminal laws around dispensing cannabis within 500 feet of school grounds. We incorporated that into our rule. We kind of cross-reference the statute. It just says you can't have a cannabis sale within 500 feet of a school. So currently no retailers are within 500 feet of the school. But that's pretty much the only thing that exists as far as any sort of retail site here in the state.
Do you know, and you may not, because you're not the Department of Liquor and Lottery, but do you know if there's similar prohibition on liquor stores being near schools?
I don't know the answer.
Okay, like I said, I appreciate that you may not know that.
Right.
Don't. No, we'd have to check with Tucker.
I know that they're sort of the vibe, for lack of better, my brain is mush, it's Friday. It has been sort of that we're gonna treat cannabis similar to how we treat alcohol. And so I'm trying to align things
Yeah.
as much as possible in my mind.
Right.
That's why I'm asking, not, I appreciate that you don't have the answer.
So, Clarkson.
As we look down the pike, just sorry to interrupt you here, but we are looking very closely at this next Friday. Tucker and Pepper are coming in to discuss the implications of the federal changes and how we might prepare for them. It's very important to be prepared because it could happen. And anyway, it would be great to trigger some of these changes. Also, it's just great to be prepared. And interstate compact on these things would be great. But to go to your question, Tanya, I'm thinking that I'm going to ask Tucker because one of the implications long term, depending on how all that goes, is what that relationship between liquor and lottery and the cannabis board might be and how they integrate. I'm going to ask Tucker to do a side by sides on some of the cannabis and liquor and lottery laws and how they compare in that regard and how we can create more parity. Wonderful. Does that make some sense?
Oh, yes. Yeah, definitely. Especially, I mean, I think you're going to hear, maybe not in this committee, but from the hemp people, that they want to be selling low THC hemp products in bars and restaurants and anywhere they sell beers.
Yeah.
So on the citing, I just want to stress that the cannabis board is not in the best position to know where to make a one size fits all retail citing rule. I mean, we were okay with doing the 500 feet from the school because that is honoring at least the intent of the drug free work zone or drug free school zone. But, towns are going to differ wildly about whether they want these in a place that has parking or on the outskirts of town or, whether they want it on a police route in case there's a break-in or some kind of issue that there can be a rapid response. We can't really craft a rule elegantly that allows towns, that will fit every town perfectly. It really should be a local decision. So I think cleaning up that section of, Title VII around local authority is probably a good idea, especially if they're going to try and expand, change the opt-in, opt-out presumption or going to have a statewide vote. Doing those in concert would be helpful.
Senator Morley.
Up in the Northeast Kingdom, there's actually some towns with no zoning.
Yes.
And so somehow the liquor board or the liquor control determines where liquor stores are going to be located in some of those towns. Would you envision something like that here in some of the towns with no zoning? Are you going to provide the guidance to where they can or should not go?
Again, I don't think that we should be dictating to the locals what they do or don't want. Even without zoning, a town can form a local control commission. And those local control commissions could be authorized to do this work, even if they don't have zoning.
I don't know if they will, but
Right. I know it's difficult. I mean, this is a very challenging area of the law because a lot of times this issue doesn't get raised until you have an actual live person trying to put it in place. So
I mean, and then all of a sudden everything.
Right. And then the board, these political bodies are stuck between, well, I have this business owner that wants to go in and they want this brand list to increase, they want the revenue, but but it's right next to a playground, So yes, there is the authorization already to form a local control commission, and they could just take on the work of saying where in the town they would want these things. Another issue that was raised by the Vermont League was around revenue share with the locals that host one of these. Currently, what happens is if you do form a local control commission, there we are required to send any license application to that local control commission before we issue the license and get their sign off. And they are allowed to charge $100 fee. And that fee was set, you know, in 2022 with the rest of the fees. And really, there's no understanding of what the cost to the locals of hosting a cannabis establishment should be. If this is purely the administrative work of reviewing an application, then $100 is probably about right. In fact, we have a municipal kind of survey that says, yeah, if you're just thinking about how long it takes us to read this application, you know, assemble the control commission and read the application, $100 is about right. But when you think about maybe some of the externalities of hosting a cannabis retail establishment or a cannabis license, it might be more beneficial and may encourage more towns to opt in if they saw some benefit other than this $100. But, you know, again, talking about revenue, the board doesn't really get involved when it comes to how you guys spend this money or how you apportion it. But we have in our original fee report suggested that, you know, it may lead to more towns opting in if there was a revenue share.
Who decides who's going to be on the local control board?
It's a local decision. They're usually it's usually some subdivision of the select board
Select board would create it.
or the select board, you know, they'll gavel out of their select board meeting, gavel into the local control meeting. It's usually something.
Are there any requirements or restrictions about who can serve on that board? Can you be a licensed cannabis operator and still be on that board?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, it's not in there.
Outlined like that in statute.
Yeah, I don't-
Not.
It's not.
Julie, just introduce yourself.
Oh, Julie Hilbert for the record. It's not, my recollection is that the qualifications aren't necessarily outlined like that in statute. But the town would have their own ethics policy.
Right.
And there's no set number of board members?
No,
No.
and I can just, if you're interested in looking into this, I mean, I'm happy to just share this temptation that authorizes the creations of saying that it's, you know, kind of everything they can do with Tucker and see if if you want to walk through this section.
Well,
Yeah, I don't know. I don't
necessarily need to get knee deep in it. I'm just
Yeah.
kind of curious.
I think it's very involved. The local control commissions,
Yeah.
there's like 50 of them. I think there's right around 80 towns have opted into retail sales, but this goes beyond retail. This is just.
So this is for, they would have established them for liquor also.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was modeled after liquor, but liquor control, there's special events. The liquor control folks get much more, the local control, liquor control.
There's a local control.
Have more to do.
Right.
You know, I can talk more about any of the other priorities of the board, but really as it relates to government operations, it's really about, to me, just clarifying these local issues so that towns can really have a little bit more control over how these feel in their town, where they're located. The hours of operation is already covered by the existing statute, but as far as the signs and ordinances and where they're located, I think it's important for us. I mean, I should note, we have paused issuing new cannabis retail licenses. You know, we're at 108. By way of reference, there's 80 or 81 liquor stores in the state, 802 spirit stores. I mean, is that the right number? I don't know, but it does feel like the towns that they're in are saturated.
So more local control, whatever that may mean, opt in, opt out, that's also this committee.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've said,
And municipal revenue sharing, those are the three.
yeah, and all of those issues are all reopening old wounds because they were negotiated very carefully 5 years ago or 3 years ago, you know, in 2020. But, you know, now that was before we ever had a market. Now that we have a market, we're living with the consequences of those decisions. It's certainly worth discussing.
Senator Diossi?
I certainly appreciate acknowledging sort of the opening of whole foods, and I think when we're building a ship while we're sailing it, sometimes we realize that things need to change. So I also appreciate the willingness to circle back to what can be hard conversations. But I also think we have a lot more information now than we did before.
Yeah.
I know, so the other thing that I just want to think about, would you say there's 802 liquor stores? But that's not the only place you can buy alcohol. You also have breweries and every gas station that sells beer and wine and every grocery store that sells beer and wine,
Restaurant.
every restaurant. So I think that's not necessarily, like, I don't know that that's just because alcohol is so much more ubiquitously available, not just in those spaces.
And we are allowed, we were authorized to create tiers of the various license types. One tier that we proposed early on was having a limited retail for towns that, you know, are tiny. You know, towns that really don't have the capacity to have anything more than a general store. You know, why couldn't you? I mean, there are, you know, two spirit stores within gas stations. Like, why couldn't you have a little cannabis kiosk behind the counter, 21 plus, you know, that has, they can only sell a limited number of products, maybe. No, just flour, you know, maybe just have, you know, something that distinguishes them, but can only be available in these kind of towns with less than like 2,000 people. We discussed it. It never got a fee associated with it, so it didn't happen. But it could be another way to increase the geographic distribution. I mean, I think one thing that's clear pre-legalization and now is that there are cannabis consumers in every community. And the more you restrict access to cannabis, the more you're shifting those consumers to alternative markets.
I appreciate that, and I imagine some folks soon will take up that idea for consideration in economic development. My question for you, and it may be a bit of an opinion question. So I know that we've had instances, particularly in gas stations and convenience stores, of the illegal sales of, is it Delta 9 THC?
There's synthetic Delta 9, there's Delta 8, there's HHC, there's the whole alphabet soup of synthetic cannabinoids, yes, that are.
And so I know that illegal sale is already happening in some of those places. And I wonder if you have any sense of whether or not allowing the legal sale would eliminate that illegal sale or make that illegal sale easier, or what are we doing to curb that illegal sale now?
Right.
Because gas stations are selling cannabis.
Right. So we investigate complaints of those, but we're not proactively in the gas stations and the convenience stores. So when we get a complaint, we'll go in, and DLL is in them. And so sometimes when they see a suspicious product that looks like, I mean, I did a presentation for Senate Ag about all these kind of copycat products and these, you know, synthetically infused hemp products. When we get a complaint, we go in, we test them, confirm that they are an illegal product in Vermont, that they do contain either THC or synthetic cannabinoid. And then we usually just have a conversation with the purveyor of those, because usually they've been kind of sold a bill of goods about them. Like, oh no, this is Farm Bill compliant. This is a totally legal product. But no, they get you high just like anything else. You'll fail a drug test if you do one. If you drive away and start drinking a THC seltzer, then you will be intoxicated. And so I think it's really important to continue to do that. Not much we can do currently about the online sales. Those are really challenging to get ahead of. And that's not just true of these illegal hemp products. That's true of illegal tobacco products as well.
Senator Clarkson.
So it does, that goes back to the, you know, the gun lottery and cannabis boards and do you ever partner with well, we have another of the committee's possible jurisdictions would be enabling DOL because they have a whole enforcement unit. You don't.
We do.
You do have an enforcement unit?
Yeah, we have
How many officers do you have?
I think 7, but they're not sworn law enforcement.
They're not
That's what's
sworn law
significant.
enforcement,
Right.
unlike DOLs. Anyway, so you do have an enforcement. Okay, I wasn't clear on that.
We do, yes. And
Because I
we-
think of you being so few staff, but I guess you have more staff than I had thought.
Yeah, I think our compliance unit has 7 people in it. That could be.
Okay. They have how many enforcement actions a year are you tracking?
We do about 100 investigations a month. And I think we had 400, I have a report that I submitted to your committee on
Yeah.
that. So we had 442 complaints last year. That led to 220-ish enforcement actions.
That's right. Okay, I'm sorry, I forgot.
Yeah, but we also have an MOU with DLL's enforcement team to cover the costs of them
Right,
doing.
that's all I was
some of
getting
this
to is-
work with us.
And you already have it.
Yeah,
Senator
Right.
White?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask one, I mean, I want to hear about your perspective on the bill that I have, 276, around municipalities, and you kind of alluded to it, so if you have a specific statement, but I do just want to ask, because I was very disappointed that we did not get cannabis farmers markets. That just seemed like such an awesome opportunity to have like the Vermont brand on, so I'm wondering, or is
We
that?
were disappointed too.
I know, and I do blame the newlyweds specifically for the fact that you weren't there in the negotiations to fight for the cannabis market.
I couldn't
but-
have been because it was on the floor of the house at the last minute. That was all.
Oh, I hadn't realized that. I thought that was a conference committee.
Oh, there
No.
was no conference.
no.
Oh, okay. So where is that? Are we proposing it again? Is it coming up? I would love to see that.
It has been, and it's in our committee and we're discussing it again.
Okay.
Yes, and for anyone who needs a very brief refresher,
Mm.
the Senate passed what was called a Cannabis Grower Showcase Pilot. The idea was that a number of cultivators can team up with a retailer and they can hold a event that includes sales only. And the only people that would be allowed into this farmer's market, if that's the word we want to use, are people that are age gated, single point of access, 21 plus. All the sales would be tracked, regulated, taxed and sold to people that are over 21. And yes, I thought it was a very positive idea, mostly because our cultivators have been clamoring
Yeah.
for a way to get in front of their customers
Yes.
directly and talk about their growing practices, establish a relationship with their customers. A lot of Vermonters want to know their farmer.
They
They
do.
want to know their beer maker. They want to know their maple sugar. And it's certainly true of cannabis as well. It included some really important public safety provisions and some profit sharing provisions so that it would actually be a benefit to the cultivators to do this. And of course, New York's been doing it for 2 years. They, through kind of a fluke and a legal hiccup in their licensing structure, grew a bunch of cannabis and then had nowhere to sell. They couldn't issue any retail licenses. So out of an emergency rule, their cannabis commission authorized farmers markets. And they went off without a hitch. There's been none of the kind of public safety concerns, like are these going to be a magnet for
Yeah.
robberies? Are there going to be untaxed sales? Are there going to be sales to minors? None of it came true. And after these emergency rules expired, the legislature made them permanent.
Mhm.
And so now they've had about 1.5 years, 2 years worth of experience holding these farmers markets. And, I've always thought it'd be a good idea for Vermont. The fact that it was a pilot also meant that we could do it without any additional staff. I thought it was a good idea. And Senator Clarkson, as she noted, is going to reintroduce the idea.
Okay.
And it passed the Senate
Yeah.
on a voice vote unanimously. There's no opposition to it last year. And then it passed 3 committees in the House favorably. And then it just got held up on a procedural issue on the floor on the last day.
Okay, well, I'd like to see that again. And then just if you could have any specific comments on S-276. And we'll be talking about the bill in a moment, but
Yeah.
just a few.
So just from the 30,000 foot view, anything to increase the geographic distribution of these kind of areas of density, retail density in the state is a benefit, I think, to consumers, to the towns, you know, and then we get a lot of opposition from local elected officials. Why do I have 11 cannabis stores within a half-mile radius? The public health folks have come into the cannabis board and talked about the negative public health consequences of concentrating retail outlets. So anything to spread out the existing ones would be very beneficial. I think whether it's through a vote, flipping the opt-in opt-out presumption, however you want to do it is we don't really take a position on that. But I would just hope that in the same bill or in a separate bill, you could also just clean up whether you want to give them the towns more or less authority. It doesn't really matter, but just clean up the confusion that's in the bill right now as to what they can and can't do. With respect to what zone, like local.
Okay.
Yes.
With respect to citing,
Citing.
Oh, okay.
Where they can, you know.
where they can locate.
The town wants to say, I only want 2 in this town. I think that should be a local decision potentially. If town says I want them, you know, away from parks and churches, you know, I think I just don't think that we're in a good position to dictate that from the 251, 247 towns.
Thank you.
Senator Yossi.
So I remember the original concern about not allowing some of that local zoning was that towns might have a vote, have an opt-in vote, and then the town might zone it into impossibility.
Right.
And is that concern gone?
It's not gone. But I also, I mean, we've seen, it's not gone. No. There are, you know, we brought in, I mentioned the director of zoning for South Burlington. He said that there are very strict protections around spot zoning. So you can't create an ordinance that's just so specific that it's only going to be in this one spot. And by the way, that spot is owned by the chair of the select board's brother or something like that. So there are some protections baked into the general kind of technically around this whole ordinances. Whether you can kind of craft a rule, it's got to be 5,000 feet away from a school, a park, a childcare center, a federal building, you know, and then you look at the map, there's nothing left. I don't know if there's a way, I don't know if that would be covered under the spot zoning. This is an area of my expertise, but I do think that the towns, whether you wanted, I think they deserve some clarity, you know, about what they can and can't do, because right now they feel like they can't do anything.
I appreciate that, and I'm absolutely in support of clarity. And I don't believe I'm about to say the words that I'm about to say, but it sounds like we might need to do a bit of a deep dive into the rules around city ordinances, which sounds fascinating. But I do want to try to create clarity in a way that gets us to where we want to be, but I totally support clarity.
Any other questions for Pepper? Okay, James, thank you very much.
Thank you.
David Silverman is here from the Vermont Cannabis Action Fund.
At least I know Tucker can make even city ordinances interesting.
I don't know if it would be an ordinance.
Welcome, Dave.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to testify today. Just by way of introduction, my name is Dave Silverman. I'm an attorney. I specialize in cannabis law. I'm also the co-founder of Flora Cannabis, a retailer in downtown Middlebury, and I am the director of the Vermont Cannabis Action Fund, or VCAF. VCAF is a coalition of over 50 retailers, manufacturers, and cultivators. We focus on solving the structural issues that are holding Vermont's cannabis market back from reaching its full potential. And we focus on actionable, concrete solutions that support the market as a whole, instead of pitting one type of licensee against another. I want to give you a quick ground floor view of Vermont's cannabis market. The market's in trouble and it needs help urgently. We suffer both from oversupply in the cultivation sector and oversaturation in the retail sector. With one store for roughly every 5,500 residents of Vermont, we rank in the top 5 most oversaturated states in the country, and we have almost 3 times as many stores per capita as Massachusetts. On the production side, it's important to note that the CCB based its projections for how much cannabis we need in this market, not on JFO's estimates, which have turned out to be accurate, but on an economic analysis that it had a consultant do. That analysis predicted a market nearly twice as large, as the one we actually have, about $250 million a year instead of roughly 150 that we have. That is kind of what has driven structurally an oversupply. As a result, we are seeing price collapses in both the wholesale and retail markets, and those collapses are accelerating as we speak. The CCB hasn't released a lot of data about the market as a whole. There's some structural reasons there for why, dealing with their inventory tracking price system being not great. But here on the ground, we know what's up. Total sales per store are down by roughly 25% in the past 18 months. That's statewide, with many long-standing stores down 35% or more, as our tiny cannabis market in Vermont is split up into ever more and smaller pieces. New entrants have tended to come in with aggressive pricing, as they should, makes business sense, to lure customers from existing stores, but that only prompts the existing stores to cut their prices to match and then demand lower prices from their suppliers. Everyone's feeling the pinch, and business failures are rising. We're seeing them, and they're getting worse. Meanwhile, the financial costs of complying with the CCB's regulatory requirements have only risen. With rising costs and falling revenues, there are very few cannabis companies in Vermont right now who have an optimistic view of 2026. It is bad out there, and without some changes, things are going to get worse. Jobs are going to get cut, and tax revenues are going to suffer. By and large, Vermont's cannabis industry is made up of very good people doing very good things for and in their communities. We have collectively created over 1,000 new jobs. These jobs are attracting and retaining a young workforce, something that has, been the political goal across the political spectrum for many years here. We're helping with that. We've created hundreds of new, small, locally owned businesses, mom and pops. And we've raised tens of millions of dollars in new tax revenues, the only tax revenues that people don't complain about paying. And we've done it, the right way. We've been responsible in the way we run our businesses. We've been responsive to our communities and the local needs of our communities. And we've done it without the parade of horribles that were predicted when legalization was being debated in this chamber and the other one from 2015 to 2020. Many of you were there. I was there. A lot of things were predicted that have not come to pass. Despite this, the state continues to treat us like the proverbial unwanted stepchild, controlling us, stifling innovation, suppressing our efforts to build our brands and engender customer loyalty, instead of celebrating our successes and supporting our growth. For years, we have proven our worth. For 4 years in, we have proven our worth and our value to the communities we serve and the state as a whole. We've earned the right to be treated like any other business. And we ask for two things. We ask for regulatory stability, and we ask for market growth. For most of the past 2 years, the cannabis industry has been feeling whiplash. Every month, it seems, there's a new enforcement priority that requires us to lurch our focus. You may have heard from constituents about the CCB's proposed change in purchase limit guidance a couple of months ago, but that was just the latest in a string of policy shifts, big and small, that place collectively a huge burden on our ability to plan ahead and operate our businesses efficiently. I dread opening the CCB's biweekly industry-wide email because I don't want to know what fresh flavor of the month I'm going to have to change to put my resources towards this month. That is true. Every couple of weeks, I get something new that drives my attention away from my business plan. And we'd like the CCB in 2026 to focus on the basics, and specifically these. We'd like them to build a functional inventory tracking system that pulls data directly from our inventory management systems, which are the industry standard, instead of the current rudimentary, self-built, custom-built web interface that requires business owners to collectively waste thousands of hours manually inputting data that already exists digitally, propagating errors. We want the CCB to launch a public data portal so that cultivators and retailers alike can get a proper view of the market and not have to guess, and we can see what market trends are, and we can see what market demand is. Other states have figured this out a long time ago. We don't. And we want the CCB to crack down on illegal sellers. like the unlicensed smoke shop in South Burlington that was recently busted by the police for openly selling to middle school students. And on internet-based hemp sellers who ship their intoxicating cannabinoids into Vermont with impunity, without ID checks. This comes by mail. And the CCB could do more. In conjunction with the Attorney General, they do not. But they could, and they should. Market growth is going to require policy change. And we suggest 5 in particular. First, Vermont is just one of 3 states that limit edibles to 5 milligrams per serving instead of 10. And just one of 2 states that cap concentrate potency at 60% THC. These caps drive consumers to the black market, to out-of-state stores, especially in our border communities, and to the internet, where products aren't tested for safety, for quality, like they are here in the state. And all of that deprives the state of tax revenues and endangers cannabis consumers' health and safety. It's time to lift these arbitrary caps. Second, by making it illegal to consume cannabis practically in any place other than one's own home, the state is scaring tourists and locals alike away from our stores. We think it should be legal to smoke cannabis wherever it's legal to smoke a cigarette. And we think it should be legal to consume ingestibles, edibles, beverages, wherever it's legal to consume alcohol. It's just treat us like others. 3, Vermont has the strictest limits on cannabis advertising in the entire country, preventing us from reaching new customers and communicating with our existing customers. Many of these restrictions are blatant violations of our constitutional rights, and that alone should be reason enough to change. But the fact is that 7 VSA 864 stifles the industry while giving considerable advantage to internet-based sellers and border stores in New York and Mass who freely advertise inside Vermont media and to Vermont residents online. 4, while the market is oversaturated statewide, the municipal opt-in requirement for retail is the primary driver of local supersaturation in places like Rutland, Burlington, Morrisville, and others. We agree with the board in that assessment. Fewer than a third of municipalities have even held a vote, and we support Senator White's bill to require municipalities to hold an opt-in vote this fall. This would allow existing retailers to spread out more naturally and support a healthier marketplace without this intense over-competition that is not healthy and not profitable for anybody, and just squeezes and squeezes and squeezes. And by the way, as prices go down, the public health lobby will tell you, you start seeing, more problematic use. And finally, 5th, we need new ways to reach customers outside of our dispensaries. We want to be able to sell cannabis at events, like concerts and festivals and farmers markets as well. Think of like in a concert, the cannabis equivalent of a beer tent at a jazz fest in Burlington. We want to be able to cater private events like weddings. These weddings, cannabis weddings happen. They just don't happen with the cannabis industry. And finally, we want Vermont to join 12 other states now, 12, including Massachusetts and New York, in licensing cannabis cafes and lounges, where customers can enjoy infused foods and beverage in a safe and social atmosphere. And so we ask for your help in supporting the hundreds of struggling small businesses here in Vermont and in preventing the collapse of an important revenue stream for the state. I thank you for your time and be happy to take any questions you have for me.
Ready, Senator Clarkson.
David, I've forgotten, and I think it's in Pepper's report that we have in our committee, but how many retail establishments did we lose last year?
Did we lose last year?
You said in your thing we're losing people.
Yeah.
Right and center.
So I believe we've lost 6 currently, and I know
there's some teetering on.
Yeah, there are several teetering, including some who have been around for a very long time. It's really very sad to see. Yeah, so like I said, statewide, if you just divide the total sales reported by the Department of Taxes by the number of stores, it is down 25%. If you exclude the new entrants who haven't been around for a year, what you get is, roughly, a lot of stores, a lot of existing stores, with 35+% reductions in annual sales, and that's not sustainable.
Senator Bielski.
I want to get too far afield of what this committee actually has jurisdiction over, but I am curious, with some of our neighboring states and the different licenses they have that we don't have, do you have any sense of how that's doing, what the impact has been, both to the business side, but also from a public health standpoint?
Yeah, so I think the lounge licenses are very new. And I don't think there's been a lot of impact studies that have come out. But the concept of places where people can consume cannabis, that's not really new. It's just been private homes or walking down Church Street or
I don't think you're supposed to do that.
you're not supposed to. Well, in fact, I went and pulled data that we've in the now 8 years, is it 8 years that the cannabis has been legal for personal possession? There's been a grand total of 150 citations issued statewide for smoking in public. So that's not something that's being enforced anywhere.
Well, I imagine it is being enforced, perhaps not very justly. I wonder if you have any breakdown on the demographics of those 150 citations.
I was not able to get that, even though I asked.
I feel like a law that is not generally enforced, but left entirely to discretion is one place where there can simply be bias that plays out.
That is historically accurate.
Any other questions for David?
Just other than.
All right, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming in.
My pleasure.
So, let me suggest we have a 10-minute break, and the next item up is F 276. And I see,
Feel free to